our foundation and our principles being around the ability to create health and happiness. But we won't stop there.
Right, well, hello. It's Connecting Consciousness here with a very special guest. It's Clayton from Roots. Now, I've done a couple of videos with the Roots products, but here's the man himself. So listen, Clayton, without any further ado, obviously people are going to see you outside the nail bar. So you need to tell us a little bit about who you are and about Roots, please.
Well, I haven't had my nails done yet, so Christina got to do that yesterday. You know, amongst all the chaos, you have to find a little bit of sanity every once in a while. So I get to spend some time outside, and as you were mentioning, we have beautiful blue skies, no chemtrails today. But as you've had the initial conversation with Christina, and Sasha has been so amazing to be able to discuss as well because of what he discovered before many others. We live in a different world now, but the issues that we're having, and it's funny because we're having brunch with one of our really good friends who has she had the largest Department of Defense counterintelligence contract in history, and what we're going over is kind of planning, because what she's seen, and she has top secret clearance, has been all over the world, has intelligence specialists implanted in pretty much every aspect of the government and spec ops and such, because of what she's been assisting with. That many people think this is a battle on healthcare and our health and wellness, and it's not. It's a battle for Western civilization and in Christianity and our spiritual base. As Simon, you've done such a phenomenal job of discussing, and I think your community understands it better than most. Because of the continual content and really foundational position that people can understand of what's really going on here. And we know that we're all here for a reason. Each one of us has our gifts. Each one of us has our purpose, but it's not all the same. But collectively, we all have to come together to create solutions. And our aspect of it, with Christina and myself, comes from two different perspectives. She, as Simon, you went over, and Sasha's gone over really well. She was put here for this. She was made for this time, and because of what she was put here for, she's actually created the solutions to not just what's going on currently over the last 2 years, but really, for the last 5 generations. And I was having some work done on myself a couple weeks ago, and the individual that was helping me clear a couple entities that were attached to me and such, he's like, the two of you have done this 4 times before. This is your 5th time together, and this is the last part of it. This is the end, of how you guys do this. And she's the solution. And it's one thing to talk that, and it's one thing to talk about, what does Clean Slate do? What can Restore do? What can Zero In do? But now that we've been doing this for 2 years, because we had our 2nd birthday on February 2nd, so 02/02/2022 was a good day. But we have Dr. Norbert Keshkesh, along with a multitude of other doctors, but Dr. Keshkesh came out with his case studies a week and a half ago, showing that with all of the complications that are going on in people, whether they've chosen to get stuck unknowingly as to what the consequences could be, or if they haven't been and they're dealing with the consequences of what's being put in us, right, from the air you breathe, the food you're eating, the water you're drinking, things that have been in us since conception and everything going forward. He was looking at some of the primary markers, and Dr. Keshkesh is an MD. He oversees the Hungarian Olympic Committee, works with high-level officials as his clients and patients, and he's had athletes in their 30s and 40s that had been sick and also got stuck, and that were having some of these post issues, inflammation markers. So pro-BNP, which is your cardiovascular inflammation marker, which is kind of important to know now. Your C-reactive protein, which is a systemic inflammation marker. But also one of the big things that's being discovered is that liver enzymes, your primary liver inflammation markers, all of these in these 30-year-old and 40-year-old athletes, people that don't have comorbidities, they're all elevated like 2 times, 3 times what is the high end of normal. They're all bad, right? And they were showing all the symptoms. They could no longer exercise. They were having trouble breathing. They were having the neuropathy issues, the brain fog, all of this stuff that you hear. So he put together the protocols, with Clean Slate, Zero In, and Restore, and has been tracking patients with all their blood work, with live blood cell analysis to look at the outcomes. And what's been, even for me to look at, and I'm fairly confident in what we're doing because I know what my wife was made for, but looking at the outcome data that he's going over, that all of these issues were normalized in 30 days. And when you see that, and like we've talked about initially, there's a difference between physical and quantum and energetics and electrical. And we understand we are not just physical. This physical part that we see that the establishment works to treat is just that holographic projection of what we really are. And when you start working on that level, you see responses very, very quickly, but you can reconstruct this entire system very, very quickly. And I think that's been the fun part to see. And 95% of people can't explain it, right? They don't understand what's actually taking place. They love what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, but those that want to challenge what we're doing don't even have a basis for argument because they don't understand the mechanisms that are in place to create it. And I think that's what's really important, especially for your community, right? From having the opportunity to be a viewer of what you've done for a long time, your community understands, you can say the metaphysical aspects. And Christina was put here just for that. So if you understand what we are and what we're made of, then taking products or components that are made with that premise from a being that was put here specifically for now, and not just to deal with this environment, but to help us upgrade, decalcify the pineal gland and begin to continually upgrade what we are for what we're supposed to become, has been absolutely, absolutely amazing. And watching people do that is what we feed upon, right? It's, we created a business to be able to create a better humanity by giving back and creating opportunities for people to create value. But just the continual aspect of watching people, just like you do on your phone, right? You get updates. I get on my cars too. I get update. I have to update my car and it'll do a software update. The same thing that has been done in phones and computers is the same thing that we have to do on ourselves, but we've been inhibited from doing so because our primary port, right, of data connection had been blocked with a bunch of fluoride. Once you remove that, and then you also remove all those other negative antennas, the mercury, cadmium, lead, aluminum, cesium, strontium, gadolinium, graphene, you can go down the list of, you can add in glyphosate into that because of its water solubility and how it creates dysbiosis everywhere in the body, not just in the gut. As you start to remove all of that stuff slowly, properly, but then you allow the body to start regenerating, we're beginning to tap into what our true potential is. Simon, you've known Sasha for a long time. If you look at Sasha right now, he doesn't look like the same person. He's gotten younger and less stressed over the last 4 or 5 months.
I think that's because he lives in Bali.
Well, he's been in Bali, but now he's just crushing it down in Mexico. So I get to go see him. In a couple weeks. But it's an amazing environment amongst all of this stress. I think this is what's really important, is because collectively there's been a massive amount of stress put on us. It's a test, right, to see what we can endure. It's testing your resolve. It's testing your IQ, whether or not you'll cave. But to see what's happening for those who choose to say, you know what, I'm ready to start making some steps to improve how this system functions, has been outstanding. It's been a lot of fun.
You were speaking about your wife, and I totally agree. The point is, unless a proportion of us make those upgrades and develop, there'll be nothing here. There'll be nothing left to go forward. And so if we don't do that, if we don't do things to help our physical body to try to catch up with our energy self, then how can we do good works on the planet? We will think about them, but we won't have the ability to make that into reality. And so one of the reasons, there's lots of reasons, one of the reasons I wanted to get behind you guys and support you was because that I realized that if we don't have this body of people who are doing everything they can to get themselves ready for the next phase, then we won't have the technicians, we won't have the wherewithal. When we hit the ground, we won't have enough to do it. And so that was my thought behind it, was because we're all being poisoned, we need to do something about it. And that's why I was so excited when I was introduced to you and your wife and the fantastic products.
Well, I think it's part of having all of these different skill sets and these amazing, I talk about being siloed, because of your influence and what you've done and what your history is and where you come from and where Christina comes from and my background and, the rest of your community. We all have different unique sets of skills, as a wise man once said, right? And it is only through that sense of community that if you're doing what you're doing and people are just listening, well, you're really just yelling into the dark, because there's no application. And I was talking to Scott McKay about this earlier this week, because Scott had got home. He said the trailer was being parked and it's been a long journey and he's ready to take a break. And I asked him, so the purpose of what you've been doing is what over the last year or two? I said, well, it was to wake people up to understand that here in the United States, for things to change, that each of us individually has to take accountability and be involved politically at the ground level, whether it's school boards, and then we have to work our way up. And I asked him, I said, so basically what you're saying is, amongst all the chaos, that people are waiting for things to change. But the lesson of this is that if you don't change and you don't get involved, we're all screwed. And that's just really it, is we're now past the point of just watching and waiting, because this is if you follow science fiction or what in movies, it's all been played out for us, right? The Matrix, you have to unplug, you have to choose, you have to have intention to say, I'm not participating in this anymore, and I'm going to see what's really going on. But then, and I don't watch many of the Ready Player One and some of these video game components that are teaching people that we're basically in a hologram. But if you're not involved, if you're not participating, you will only be a victim. There is no other option, because if we don't do what we're made to do, and this is the key component to everything that we do as far as Root and how this plays out, we do our little part, right? And this is a much bigger collective issue. But if you don't clean this up, there are people that are becoming aware of what's going on, right? You can say red pill, blue pill. You become aware. But the awakening starts when you start to decalcify your pineal gland. You start to get reconnected. You start to clean out everything that's in you. And this amazing operating system, this biomechanical quantum system that we are, when it starts to turn on, because you've been living for a while, you haven't been alive. And that's what we're reactivating, is turning on these biological mechanisms that have been put aside or turned off or covered because of the heavy metals, the calcification of the pineal gland, what mercury does in your brain and your central nervous system, what it does to shut off your body's detox pathways, and every other component of the body is disrupted. When you start to activate all this stuff, you get to become what we're made to be. And then the more people we do that, the more people start to come together, and they realize that, oh, we are the solution. This is our world. We were put here for a reason. We weren't put here for entertainment, right? it's us that fixes this. But Simon, like you're mentioning, if we don't do what we need to do to take care of this, we can't ever fix anything, and we're going to end up being sheep.
You know, that's exactly it, isn't it? The problem we have is that people don't understand the capabilities of what's next. And I'm sad to say a lot of people are quite, when I say happy with their life, I don't think anybody really is happy with their life, but they don't understand that there's a potential future that's very different, and that they are entitled to it. We're all sort of told that, you know, you're not worthy, or you're not going to win this, or you're not going to get that. And the reality is that whilst we're all divided and separate, then that's exactly where the controllers want us to be. And so if people can actually take back their sovereignty by connecting to God's source, or whatever we want to call it, then they will become aware of the tricks that are being played on them. Yeah. That's the point. When the pineal is activating and you have a 24/7 channel connecting to the 12th dimension, or wherever it might be, you are aware of what's going to happen to you before it happens to you. And that's a heck of a shock for people. And, you know, the products that you have, you know, they do that. Not immediately. Yep. It takes time, because we're overcoming years and years of poisoning. Let's be blunt about it. But when I looked, and I was looking for, you know, people to get behind and support and be involved with, there are not very many products out there that actually come from the heart. Yours does. Yeah. There are some very well-meaning people out there, Clayton, but they haven't actually got it, not yet anyway. And, you know, you definitely have got it. And Connecting Consciousness, and thank you for saying that. We've been going 11 years now. And I realized that we've got to take the fight to the doorstep. In other words, we've got to arm ourselves. And your products are the armor that we put on our bodies, if you like. And so, you know, we've got to fight back. And we're not going to wait for the 7th Cavalry, because we are the 7th Cavalry. So anything I can do to help people to take back their lives and their future and what they're meant to be. You know, I've often said, you know, humans have got to actually understand what it is to be human.
Yes. Well, and you know, it's funny because, you know, Simon opened, or you being Simon, but Sasha opened my eyes to doing some research into Tartaria and to some of the other hidden parts of our history, right? Of it really going and trying to find some interesting stuff. And it was there was a history of the world that I think that I was watching. There's like a 3-hour or 4-hour documentary on about, you know, some of the buildings all over the world, that if you do a little excavation, you find that there are other levels that have been buried in mud. And you get into some of the history of this, and you go, wait a minute, the narrative just doesn't seem right. And it was funny because I was talking with my son about this, and my kids, you know, because they're Christina's children, they were studying quantum physics when they were 10, and, you know, having them get into this, and, you know, understand and look at the scenario, and they're like, well, what does that mean historically? You know, who built these amazing civilizations? Who was here before us that did all this? Who was so amazing that built this infrastructure? I'm like, it's not who was here before us. It was us, but it was the better version, the less controlled, the less toxified version of us that we've been droned and controlled. And that if we really understand that we are light is light. You know, I look at this up here and you go, okay, that shines pretty bright. Well, you can try to control it with clouds and, you know, a way of filtering it, but light is light. If you figure out how to remove what's inhibiting you from glowing, and you just say, you know what, we're going to crank up the volume a little bit, let's see what happens, we're all going to be better off. And I think the important part is the cascade effect that takes place as well, because we are not all made to adapt at the same time. Some of us are early adopters. Some of us need a little more information, but as you as you start to see people around you start to glow a little bit more, and you ask the questions of what are you doing? They're like, oh, I've done this, I'm using this. Like, well, maybe I should try that. And we're going to start to see this. And I think what we're seeing now is the beginning of that response. You know, as we've now had about 2 years of bullshit to where people go, wait a minute, I'm not buying into this. But now we're seeing the process of, oh, we need to respond. I need to take care of myself. And whether it's because you don't want to be sick or you don't want to have complications of what's going on, or if you realize that I am the response, I have to step into my role. And most of us don't know what that is until you start to clean stuff up, until you get connected, because you're not getting the information you need that lets you know how you participate in this greater community. And you know that I can bet you, with what you've done over the last 11 years and watching you and the knowledge that you have, the experience you have. I was talking with my friends about this because your name came up, that I was going to come have a conversation. She's like, I know who Simon is. And I said, yeah, you know his family's history. And she's like, yeah, because she went to private school in London. Her family was from Lebanon, where I think her dad was the prime minister or whatnot. And she's like, yeah, I know who Simon is. I know his family's background. But people look at you like you are this amazing source of information, which you are, because you've spent more time working on yourself. But what people fail to understand is they're not different from you. They're just behind you. And I think that's what's really important, and that's our position. It's helping people ascend.
Right. It's interesting because taking the religious Bible element aside, the fall from grace wasn't being chucked out of the Garden of Eden because of an apple. It was because we lost, or we were tricked out of what we had, because we couldn't think bad of anybody. We couldn't believe anybody could be so evil, and so we were like candy from a baby. So we were dumbed down, had our DNA altered, and all the rest of it. And so the alterations that have occurred, perhaps since Sumerian times, have been more physical, but the ones that were done before that were far more clever. They were far more energetic. And so all we're doing, Clayton, is reclaiming what is ours. We are wanting to take back what was taken from us. So we're not reaching out for something that's not ours. We're taking back every man and every woman, every child, their DNA. They are taking back what is specifically encoded for them to take back. And that's one of the hardest things to explain to people, because we live in a world where if your ball goes over the fence into next door's garden, you got to go ask, can I have my ball back? But we shouldn't be doing that now, because we need to go anywhere to get back what was taken from us. And so the products that you've got, because of your wife's unique position, I can't say that's the only product on earth that works. I can't say that, but I'm saying it's the one I choose to take personally, because I'm taking it and I recommend it. And I'm throwing my weight behind that, because we've got to get out of this hole, Clayton. We've got to get out of this mess. And we've got to take back what's ours. Because look, these other beings, they're technologically superior to us, but spiritually they're so far behind us.
And that, I think that's the big part. And I was going over this with our friend, because she's going over, the military aspect, right? And when you say take back, I think the other key word is when people think of taking, they the connotation or the denotation is, oh, they're stealing something that wasn't theirs. The other way of looking at it is you're reclaiming it, because it is us, but it's what we were made for. It's what was taken from us. So we are reclaiming it. And that people have to understand that in war, especially with what we're dealing with, because we're not dealing with a physical war. This is not viral. It's spiritual. You're right. It's beyond just the physical. And if you can't win a spiritual war with force, you can't beat darkness with force. You can only beat darkness with light. You can beat darkness with love. That is what we are. But without amplifying what we are, you can't overcome the darkness. Right. And I think it's been a big thing for me over the last 20 years. What, the journey that I've had in studying, and, people ask me about all this stuff. They're like, when did you start learning about this stuff? I'm like, about 20 years ago. But as we learn, and when you talk about us being light and what we are, but understanding the alternative, people have failed to accept that we live in a very dark world, right? Because we don't want to stare into the abyss. But now with darkness coming to light, as we hear in many different aspects, and whether it's different chats or such, that you hear dark to light, and you begin to understand that the level of darkness was beyond what we could really comprehend, and we allowed it. The satanic pedophilia, and I don't think that there's much darker than that. And when people begin to understand the prevalence, and you go, oh, this is something that's been absolutely pervasive in society for a long, like you talked about, multiple generations, but historically, many generations, and that this is what we're combating. It was our absence that created this environment, and now we have to step up.
That's really interesting, because although it's not widely discussed, one of the reasons for the way we're going at the moment, I know that the United States military is quite keen for people to experience this pain at the moment, because people tend to remember better when they've been in pressure. And I was chatting to someone the other day, and I was saying, Great Britain got bombed very heavily in the Second World War with the Germans. And so for 25 years after the end of the Second World War, everyone remembered the war, and they would write books on it, and they were careful. But after comes a time when people let their guard down, and they're no longer thinking about it. Because if you have a controlling element that is leading you down what we call the garden path in this country, I don't know what you call it in the States, but just leading you down the garden path, and you just take your eye off the ball. And so I think what's happening is that people are being shown in their face what happens when you take the eye off the ball. Now, that's the physical side, which the majority of people understand. What you're saying, quite rightly, is that there's a hidden war. There's a hidden war of not just truth, but it's choice.
Yes,
it's choice.
Free will. It goes back to the simple premise of free will, right? And because of it's fun that we're having this conversation on Sunday, right? Because it's supposed to be our day of rest. I'm like, you know what? If you're mission and purpose driven, there is no day of rest. You might apply it differently, but we don't get rest days. And it's that point of free will, but also understanding that there are entities, like you said, there are beings that have a greater understanding of our power, of the influence that we possess. So they're doing everything they can, or everything that they could for multiple generations, to keep us from activating our free will and saying, oh, well, you don't want to do that. Even through the churches. And it was one of the things that we've been going over at brunch here, that Christian and the term Christian, right, and the real terminology of that, of having a personal, direct relationship with Christ's source, right, is Christianity. The rest of the construct is really bullshit. But Christian giving in the United States is over $400 billion a year, but it's all spread out. It's not done properly. The Christian base, because it's all segmented, is throwing money away. And people look at these issues and go, well, there's a problem in the media. Well, for $400 billion a year, you could buy CNN, you could buy Fox, you can buy NBC, you can buy Disney.
Well, yeah, the thing is that people want to go to heaven.
But that whole construct, right, of, oh, you have to do it our way. If you don't give us money, if you don't give us the power we need in this world, we won't give you an invitation so you believe you can get in. Let alone, it's like, oh, well, actually, you just need to be connected to the source personally. You don't need to come through us. But, you know, it's that hard part of accepting.
I mean, what I would say is that, you know, you and I both know that there are some fantastic pastors out there. There are some fantastic churches, and a good Christian church is a church that helps to build the congregation closer to God. A bad church is a church that actually seeks to place itself between the congregation and God, where a congregation sees the church or the pastor or the building as more important than God. In other words, I'm going to church because I want to make sure that the pastor sees me and knows that I went to church. Now, that's not what this is about. And Jesus himself said, you know, you don't need to go to church to pray. Well, that's clearly not something that's going to be advertised in a church. So I'm not against churches, far from it. I support churches 100%. But a church must be there to ease the passage between the actual audience, the members, whoever they are, and God, and not try to get in there on it. And, you know, whether that will come in the future, I don't know. But, you know, there are some pretty good churches out there and some pretty good guys, and there are some very bad churches. So, you know, yeah, I said to one person, you go down the block, you find a church, it doesn't feel right to you. You go down the next one and it feels right to you.
Yeah, and it's important, you know, to understand, you know, that gut feeling, right? Because that's getting reconnected. You know, we hear about the gut brain connection, you know, so commonly now, because of science, or maybe it's marketing or whatnot. But understanding that gut, and it goes like this. Let's break it down, because it's funny that I have my sweatshirt on today. You have gut, heart, brain, source. Everything's got to be connected. It's all part of the same thing, right?
I'm going to have sorry, Clayton, I'm going to have to interrupt you, because the audience are going to ask why. What they will say is, why have you got a broken heart?
You know what? It's funny. I picked my sweatshirt out, and it's a Riot Society shirt, which I thought was fitting too, because I'm like, you know what? We might just have to be the Riot Society, like, because, you know, there's two ways to win an argument, right? You can use reason and you can use force. And when reason goes away, if you're going to try to use reason when someone else is going to try to use force, you won't ever win that argument. You know, so there comes a time, you know, and it's happened a few times in history where people have had to use force to get a point across. And we've usually been successful in how we do that. You know, and when you look at humanity right now, I mean, this is what we're dealing with. I mean, we're not dealing with people that are really heart-centered and that are working and functioning with a heart full of love and a, you know, a heart and a brain and a gut full of what we're created from. And so, but it goes back to this key component. Each one of us.
You're right, because if someone turns up and wants to stick a needle in your children and you can't reason with them, then you have to use force, because you're not going to let someone hurt your children. And I think that's the point, that we have to be able to play out I tried the soft approach. We have to do that. And Trump was very good at doing that. But there does come a time where every individual person, Clayton, has to say, I'm not going to be pushed around anymore. Correct. Because I'm human. I'm a human, and that means something. I'm not a dog or a cat that can be kicked and pushed. I'm not going to take that from you anymore. And I'm hoping that the human race has got the determination and the ability, and still the connection to God, to fight back. And there is no court in the land that will stop you from defending yourself. That's my
Right.
view.
I think there's 2 points. There's 2 points to that, and I was talking about this on Monday on one of my, or actually it was Wednesday, I think, with Christina, and we were doing our anniversary call. Is that you hear the term peaceful, from so many people, that we want to have a peaceful protest, that we want to be peaceful. Well, the problem is most people disregard the definition of peaceful, because in order to be peaceful, you have to be capable of absolute carnage. Because if you're not capable of absolute carnage, you're not peaceful. You're harmless. And without there being an understanding of, I love movie quotes because I'm an auditory learner. And the show Breaking Bad was such a phenomenal piece, of television writing, that Mr. White had one quote that I think is something that can be translated across any culture. When things were starting to get a little crazy, and his wife came to him and said, "Oh, we're in danger." He's like, "I'm not in danger. I am the danger." And that's the whole point. We are the danger. We are the solution.
We are absolutely the danger, because if we weren't, the bad guys wouldn't be so desperate to control us.
We wouldn't get it.
They know what we're capable of, but we don't know what we're capable of, and that's what's so crazy about all of this.
Yeah, of just getting to the point of understanding who we are and what we're made of, and what we're capable of, and what we were intended to be. And and I think the important part of building that response is like we'd hit on. Not everybody finds this at the same time. That each of us that's here, those in your community that are choosing to act or respond, serve as the example for the rest of the population. Because while they might be slow on the uptake, it doesn't mean that they're incapable. It means it's not their time. They need a little more information, and they need guidance. They need someone to hold their hand. They need an example, right? Because we've been programmed. Many people are more toxic than others, right? So they're incapable of receiving the information that many others of us are receiving. I see it being an outsider in looking at how people are responding to you in social media and such, because you've provided this massive amount of information. But I see posts and people like, well, Simon is saying this and this, and he's been wrong on this. I'm like, it's not that he's wrong. It's that the interpretation of information and timing in this world is in flux. And there is no timeline other than God's time. And if you look at it, you're like, I have this conversation with my kids and my wife. They're like, well, you said these things were going to happen in this time. I was like, I gave you an idea that things could happen on these timelines, but everything is open to interpretation and change, because you're dealing in an environment where everything is fluid. And much like Bruce Lee said, we have to act like water, be like water. We have to be fluid, but we have to be able to crash. We have to be able to flow. We have to be able to move and adjust in any environment, and to be fluid. And I think with that, it's just a matter of putting us in the position where we each become a little bit better every day, right? Because we don't know where it starts. We don't know your fountain.
I think the thing is that I believe that we should actually be more advanced down the road than we are. I'm not sure whether it's because the bad guys have pulled an ace out of the hat, or whether the projected waking up of the vast majority of people has not occurred at the rate that I expected. And I do believe that we are moving forward, but I believe we're behind schedule. I actually
Yes.
think that. And that's why I'm really pushing these products, because we need to catch up. And, you know, we can't bring to fruition all the things we want if the head of the horse is through the finishing line, but the tail is still out the back. And that's where we are, Clayton.
Like we're getting a little stretched. We're getting a little stretched here, but you know, I think it goes on the other side as well. And this is what I was talking with our friend about. It's like when this process started 4 years ago, and you know, we had the conversation about draining the swamp 5 years ago now. Good Lord. You know, they had the conversation about draining the swamp and you know what that would entail, and most people not understanding what that meant. But most people think of a swamp as not being very deep, but being murky. And then when they started to dive into this, they're like, oh no. I mean, we're not looking at feet, we're looking at miles deep. And we're looking at a whole global and beyond global issue, right? That it is not just on one plane. We're dealing with multiple planes of issues going miles deep in many instances. That, yeah, the response is taking a little more time because the depth of the dirt was greater than what was comprehensible. And knowing that response as we start to become more enlightened, you know, that the response to that choice or that behavior is also going to be met with resistance. And you know, there's just this multitude of factors that are in place right now, but the important part is that there's no opportunity to quit. You know, there's no time to pause.
There's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to go. You either die where you stand or you're victorious. And
Yep.
no one can sit on the fence anymore, Clayton. You're either one side or the other. And that's the choice. That's the moment we're on. Clayton, we've been going for about an hour. And I know that you want to get back to your friends. So is there anything that regarding, you know, the wonderful things that your wife is involved with and you help manage, is there anything that the audience could benefit from? What can you say?
I will tell you that with zero in, right? Because it is the X factor. Because while we talk about, you know, the detoxification, the decalcification of the pineal gland, the importance of killing off the mold and the fungus and the response for your gut, the new literature that's coming out about the importance of melatonin, which is created from serotonin, but neurotransmission, dopamine and serotonin, are so crucial for our overall function. If you want to eliminate the stress, which is killing us, which is intended, right? Whether it's social stress, social media, the news, life in general, stress is the great killer. I will tell you, the little capsules of greatness that you find in Zero In, if you begin to play with them, and when I say that, not just take one in the morning and one in the afternoon, but really start adjusting your biochemistry. Watch what happens with two capsules or 3 capsules. Because if you give your gut the ability to produce more dopamine and serotonin, you resonate at a higher level than you've ever imagined. We have elite athletes that are seeing performance increases that drugs can't do, right? Substances that have been deemed to be illegal are not doing what this little capsule is doing. And so when you look at it from a performance standpoint of every aspect of humanity, if we all start functioning higher, if we're happy, if we're functional, if we're more alert, we're relaxed, if we're sleeping better and we're dreaming, which is the most crucial component to all of this. If you want nothing more to understand why this is important, there was the discovery of the glymphatic system like 6 years ago or so, which is the last organ system of the body, because we know lymph, but the glymphatic system has been this underlying little component that we didn't know about. It's what washes your brain at night. It's what washes away all of the tau, right? The heavy metals will build up that amyloid plaque and such that builds up over time. Well, your glymphatic system that washes your, inside the blood-brain barrier, right? Blood doesn't get there. Glymph does. if you're not sleeping, if you're not getting into REM sleep, it doesn't work. This is why people become cloudy, right? Because that mechanism is not taking place. How do you get to sleep better? Well, you decalcify your pineal gland, you boost serotonin and dopamine, the serotonin becomes melatonin, you get to sleep, the extra serotonin becomes DMT, you start dreaming, you get to wash your brain, and everything starts to light up. Yeah, so it's the beauty, and it's the hard part, right? I mean, because we're diving into realms of science. You talk to most doctors and you go, what about my glymphatic system? And every one of them will go, huh? Because they don't know, they weren't taught in school. And you begin to understand that we're playing at levels of which the rest of the establishment doesn't even comprehend yet. And it's the beauty of having the pegacorn, with Christina being able to step into what she was created to do, that she knows what she's made to do. But the beauty is she doesn't understand everything that she's doing. She's just creating, right? She's told she gets the downloads, so I'm going to do this and this and this and this. So she's creating, but being able to interpret what she's doing and then apply it and see how people are responding are what's absolutely beautiful. So I think the one thing is just understand, I think as we have this beautiful Sunday here, understand that each of us is a masterpiece, but you're not hanging in the Louvre. You are that masterpiece that someone's going to find in the attic that's been there since 1952, that you have to clean off the patina. And that as you start to remove that patina and you start to do some work, you realize that, oh, I am the masterpiece. And that over time, then you get to go on the wall. But each one of us has that process of restoration that has to take place. And, we're at the forefront of that. That was longer than I expected.
Well, thank you. There's a certain masterpiece in the Louvre that has an enigmatic smile, of course. So, let's hope that that's what we have as patriots and as true believers and just honest people. So listen, lots of love to you and to your wife and to all the hardworking people with you. And it's been lovely to have a chat. And I'm sure this will be really helpful, not just for my audience, but anyone who watches it, actually. So thank you. Wonderful, Clayton. Brilliant. I'm sure we'll talk again.
Thanks for letting me hang out with you and Becky and the pets.